There is a legend about the mythical beings called the Rain Elves. They were beautiful creatures known for their flowing white hair. However, they had a much more memorable detail: their powers. Each elf had a special connection to water. They could control it and use it to heal and make potions. They lived in a place called the Flowing Forest. The forest thrived from the power of a magical crystal that laid at the heart of the forest. The elves dedicated their lives to the crystal as it kept them safe and gave them prosperity. Their village circled the great tree that the crystal resided in. The Rain Elves had existed for hundreds of years. Unfortunately, their time came to an end. A great threat that the elves called the Great Shadow arrived. It was a giant black fog that withered everything it touched. The elves fought endlessly to defend the crystal with their powers, but it was all in vain. One by one, the elves began to fall, and the blood of those who protected the crystal fell upon it and turned its once dazzling blue into a haunting red. Upon that day, a dreadful fog encased the forest once known to be the creator of life, and the one who caused it sat triumphantly at the center over all the people he had slaughtered. Most of the elves were suspected to be dead, but some believed that there were a few survivors left. No one is sure, but people believe that the remaining elves could no longer enjoy the beauty of water like they once had. Instead of the crystal blue, they see the red blood of their fallen clan and the pain and suffering of the forest they used to call home. People think a few of the elves escaped, but they're wrong. Only one managed to leave in time. The king, Arhyles, the strongest elf in all of history. Unfortunately, the Great Shadow knew of this and hunted for his head. Arhyles lived his life on the run. His daughter had died in the attack. The only thing that remained was her baby. He could not protect the child, so he sent it to the future where it could survive while he fought the darkness. He knew that this child would be the one to save the flowing forest and heal the crystal.
5,000 years in the future.
I'm currently a senior in high school along with Luca, my best friend. He moved in with me since his parents kicked him out. They weren't very good parents. I live alone, so now it's just me and him. It's a Friday today, so both of us are going to work, since neither of us have classes. He's a barista at a popular cafe, La Maison, near where we live, and I work as a programmer and beta tester. On top of this, I manage finances for the cafe. Ideally, I would work from home so I wouldn't have to deal with people. I'm not really a people person, but ever since Luca got a job here, he makes me do my work at the cafe. At least he gives me free coffee. It isn't really free, but he pays for it, so it is for me. 1 pumpkin spice latte for an unwilling customer, he says as he sets my drink on the table. You know I don't like people, I replied nonchalantly, taking the coffee in one hand, but keeping my eyes on my computer screen. Yes, but... He got cut off by his coworker calling him over. Luca left shortly after to return to his work while I returned to mine. It was tedious work, but it paid the bills. After a few hours, Luca's shift was over, and we both headed to the store. I'm the one who cooks, so I know what we need to get. Right as we entered through the doors, something happened to me. It felt like something shot through my whole body like lightning, while my vision blurred for a split second. As soon as it was over, I let out an exasperated gasp, paired with an anxious face, earning a questioning look from my friend. Although it was quick, I saw something. A letter? Maybe a note? It said, "Prepare for the end." And there was a picture of the world in utter chaos. Burning buildings, corpses, and zombies. I had no clue if it was real, but it felt like it. Like it was the truth that couldn't be changed. I don't want to listen to it, because if I'm wrong, this will come back to bite me, but if it's true and I don't listen to it, I could get me or Luca killed. I decided against all rationality to listen to what it had to say. I turned to Luca and started to tell him what to get. Non-perishables, seeds for food, any and all medical supplies, batteries, clothes, anything that we would need if we were stuck somewhere for over a year. He questioned me, asking if I was okay. I told him that it would make sense later, and that he should use as much money as he needed. It would be useless after the Calamity starts. Although he was reluctant to spend all our money, he trusted me to no end, and did what I asked of him. We each loaded our cars with supplies, so much so that I almost couldn't see out the rear window. However, this wasn't all that we needed. We would have enemies to face, and for that reason, we needed ways to protect ourselves. At this point, he really started to question why we were doing this, but he put his faith in me and kept going along with it. He kept bombarding me with questions, but I always deflected them. If he knew why I was doing this, he would probably think I'm crazy. Soon we dropped off our supplies at the house. When my parents died, they left behind a large sum of money and a large estate. The house has 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, and overall 2,500 square feet. The house is located on the outskirts of the town and has 49 acres of land. It wasn't field land since we weren't farmers, but it was clear with an area of trees off to the left. After we dropped off the stuff, I hooked up a trailer and headed towards the hardware store. I went there and I sent Luca to a pawn shop to buy weapons. Guns, swords, bows, spears, daggers, anything and everything. Weapons that don't require ammo are the best options since that runs out. I bought a bunch of building supplies, wood, nails, metal, barbed wire, rope, tools, everything. I also bought generators and solar panels and general maintenance things that we could need in the future. Once we got it all, we headed back to the house. It was turning into night, and me and him were quite tired. Although I hated it, I had this nagging feeling that kept me going, the feeling that we were running out of time. I told Luca to rest, but that I was going to start building a perimeter around our land. I had gotten started on building it. It was going to be around 20 feet tall, which wasn't easy to do. It would surely take a few days, especially if I want to add a motion detection system. The most I could do by the time the sun came up was a frame. I would need Luca to help me with it later. It was the next day when I headed back to our house. Luca had been making breakfast for us. As I walked in, it was clear that I was tired and anxious. He seemed to notice this as he looked at me with concern. He asked me to get some sleep, but I declined since I had to start training with some of the more unique weapons. I already knew how to fight with martial arts, but knowing how to use weapons isn't exactly a bad thing. However, Luca wouldn't let me, as he finally decided to voice his thoughts. "That's it. What is going on with you? 1 minute we're at work. Next thing I know, we're spending all of our money and you're building a wall," he yelled, staring at me for an answer. I couldn't keep it from him. He deserved to know the truth. He trusted me when I kept him in the dark. It would be wrong for me to keep this from him any longer. So right then and there, I told him everything that happened and the vision I had seen. I thought for sure he would think I was crazy because, honestly, I thought I was crazy. I was worried he would leave me after this. He was all I had. It doesn't matter how much preparation I do. Without him, I know that I wouldn't make it. Apparently, he could tell what I was thinking because next thing I knew, he was hugging me, telling me he believed me, that I wasn't crazy. As soon as my body felt his warm embrace, my lack of sleep caught up with me, and I passed out right there in his arms. Luca took me to bed and let me sleep for the rest of the day. However, something lingered in the back of his mind. Why didn't I see it too? I woke up around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. As I got up, I went outside to look for Luca since he wasn't in the house. I was amazed at what I saw. Somehow he managed to finish building most of the wall. I still had to add the security system, but it was incredible work. The wall was 20 feet high and 4 feet thick. There was a railing and platform for people to walk on the top, and ladders about every 15 feet. I had no idea how he managed to do this, but I was thankful that he did. We still needed to set up the chicken coop and cropland, but we'll do that later. I was so happy that Luca did this for me. Believing me was enough, but doing this, I'm so lucky I met him. I saw him carrying some wood over towards the chicken coop and rushed over to help him. I took some from his arms and thanked him for what he did. When we arrived at the coop, there was a pitch-black snake slithering on the ground. It looked like a python. Luca told me not to move, and as he did this, I had another vision. It was the snake in front of us, but something was different. I was next to it, and I looked older than I was now. I crouched down and let it slither up my arm. When it got to the older me's shoulder, it jumped off and lunged towards me. I ducked to avoid it, however. Instead of attacking me, it flew over me. When I looked back up at the older me, I saw the snake behind me, but it was huge, the size of a basilisk with wings that spanned the size of a whale. Right then it hissed, and I snapped back to reality. Luca was about to hit it with a piece of wood when I yelled at him to stop. Just before he hit it, he stopped and looked at me confused. He asked me why, but instead of answering, I decided to show him. I knelt in front of the snake and held my hand to it just like in the vision. It was a little skeptical, but climbed my arm anyway. When it got to my shoulders, it licked my face, and I laughed a little at the feeling. I laughed a lot more when I saw Luca's face. He looked as if he saw a ghost. I turned to the snake and told him I was going to name him Pitch. What happened next, though, that was the most shocking thing that happened this week. "I like it," Pitch said, while giving a hiss afterwards. Me and Luca simultaneously screamed at this, absolutely stunned that a snake spoke. "I will stay with you. Not the other one, though," he said while glaring at Luca. "If snakes can even glare." I just laughed while Luca looked at him offended. I introduced us to Pitch and explained what we were doing. Thankfully, he didn't think we were insane. Instead, he confirmed what we said and told us about how the Calamity was coming. As much as me and Luca wanted to deny it and say he was lying, we were indeed talking to a snake and had no right to not believe what he said. Pitch didn't know much, but he told us as much as he could, such as all living things will start to change and gain new abilities. Lower life forms will soon become intelligent. The sun and moon will morph into something new, and a new species of human will soon wreak havoc on the whole world, causing destruction everywhere they step. Right now, we were currently setting up a gate at the front of our property. Pitch was helping. I wanted to ask him when the apocalypse would happen, but I figured he didn't know or he would have told us by now. Unfortunately, that meant we had to work twice as fast, which wasn't an issue, since the stress pushed us to work at our very best. We had just finished wiring the gate when it started to sprinkle. I looked up with pain. Ever since I was born, the rain had been red. All the water had. I didn't think it was weird until my parents told me it was supposed to be blue. I wasn't sure why the rain hurt the most, considering all the water was like that to me. But it was. It wasn't physical pain, but mental, like something in my heart was crying out at the sight of it. I left Luca to finish the gate while I went and finished the chicken coop. After I was done, I headed back inside since it was getting late, around 10:30. I decided to make dinner for when Luca gets back. After a little while, I heard the door open and saw a drenched Luca walking in. I told them dinner was ready, and Luca offered to help me set the table, which I agreed to. The three of us had a nice dinner when I decided to present an idea to the two. I suggested that we build little houses so other people could stay with us if they needed to. They agreed to it, but stated that if we wanted others to stay, they would have to pull their own weight. I believed that it's a good idea, and started writing what we were going to do. We could build them by hand, or we could buy modular homes, or do both since buying would cost a lot, but building would take a lot of work. I decided that we would do both and started drawing out the blueprints for the cabins we would build. We would also need to build some sort of medical facility. I was doing all this in the living room while Luca was putting up dinner. Afterwards, I showed him my plans, and he went to the store to buy what we would need. Since he was doing that, I decided to start organizing our storage room with all the supplies. It was in the basement, which we had not been in much since I inherited the house. It still had my parents' stuff in it, but I needed to clear it out for our supplies. I moved a few boxes upstairs, deciding to go through them with Luca when he got back. I went back down and I tried to lift the next box, but it was significantly heavier than the rest. I chose to open it there to see what was so heavy. When I opened the box, I saw an old wooden chest. I ripped the cardboard off of it and took a step back to get a better look at the chest. It had an old rope design along the edges and had a book-shaped lock for a key. It was made from this odd, dark red wood. As I looked around in the scraps of cardboard, I found the key. I grabbed the key and put it in the lock, turning until I heard the click I was looking for. Once it was unlocked, I opened it slowly in case there were moths in it or some other kind of animal. There wasn't an animal, but something completely different. It was a book and a letter. Nothing more, but it had an extravagant case and cover. It was a black and green wolf. Its eyes were emerald and its fangs were diamonds. The entire book was covered in different gems. There were chains littering the corners and a ring attached to the spine. I thought it would have been better to read the note before I opened the haunted-looking book. I grabbed the letter and folded it open. It read, "If you are reading this, you are the new owner of the Zarekt Ring, a powerful magic apparatus. Its abilities are immense like no others. I'm afraid I can't list them all to you as I am being hunted. This book will tell you all you need to know and will help you in the Calamity. Under no circumstances are you to let this fall in another's hands. It chose you and only you to be its wielder. I must go. May you save us all. Arls." I found it hard to believe, and against my better judgment decided to put it on. I slowly slid it onto my right ring finger. As I do so, its eyes begin to glow. It matched the book with its emerald eyes and its wolf design. I decided to read the book later and put it in my bag with the letter. Then I closed the chest and headed upstairs. I went to my room and put the book along with the note in a compartment in my floor. I wasn't trying to hide it from Luca. I was trying to hide it from anyone who was an unwelcome guest. After all, we were letting random people stay with us in the future. I don't know who I can trust. Afterwards, I headed downstairs and saw that the rain had stopped. I also noticed that the truck was back, which meant that Luca was too. I made my way outside to find Luca while dodging the red puddles that littered the ground. Although no one else can see it, when it gets on my clothes, it stains red, only being visible to me. After I walked around for a while, I saw Luca carrying wood into the barn. I walked up to him just as he set some down and asked him if he would go through the stuff in the basement with me. He agreed as he turned to face me. Just then he saw my ring and asked where it came from, which was not surprising considering how shiny and extra it was. Not to mention Luca always seemed to notice every little thing about me. I told him I would explain while we searched the boxes. To be honest, the reason I wanted him to search with me was in case there were any other magic items. It would calm my nerves greatly knowing he had something to defend himself with during the Calamity. I grabbed his hand and dragged him inside. Just when we got through the door, I realized the lack of a sarcastic snake and asked Luca where he was. He told me Pitch was getting rid of rodents while ordering dinner. I nodded my head and led him to the living room. The two of us sat on the floor looking through different boxes. We started going through things while I explained what happened. My eyes were trained on the boxes, but I could tell he was staring at me. After a couple of seconds, I paused my talking and looked up at him. He stared at me for a minute, then left his seat and ran outside. I quickly followed him and managed to catch him on the porch. "Why are you leaving?" I said while tightening my grip so I don't lose him. "What's wrong?" "Why?" he screamed. "Why is it always you? Why do you have to be the one that has to do this? Your life is already hard enough," he said, looking down. I finally started to realize just how hard all of this was hitting him. He followed me blindly, and I didn't even bother to ask if he wanted to go. I stepped towards him, letting go of his arm. "I don't mind, really. It's actually super cool having magic and a talking snake." I spoke softly, trying to calm him down. "I'm fine with it," I said, giving him a hug. Although he was taller than me, I was standing on a step, so it wasn't as awkward. "But I'm not," he mumbled in my shirt, so I couldn't hear what he had said. I asked him, but all he said was that he was agreeing with me, and I believed him. We stayed there for a second when I finally decided to tell him why I had asked him to help me with the cleaning. He was very open to the idea and said that we should start looking again. So the two of us headed inside and got to searching. Hours passed and we found nothing. I was almost half asleep by the time Pitch got back. Luca informed him on the ring and asked him if he knew anything. Sadly, he didn't, but he had heard the name Arls before and just couldn't remember where. I told Luca that we should go to sleep, but he was intent on finding something. He said I should just rest and that he will after a little while, but I knew he was lying. I agreed anyway, knowing how stubborn he can get. So I said goodnight to him and Pitch then headed to my room. Just as I flopped on my bed to sleep, my phone rang. I grabbed it and looked at the caller ID. It was my boss. I answered the call and listened to what he had to say. He was nagging me about missing work, but I was done with him. I just wanted to sleep. So I told him I quit and hung up. I laid down, finally going to sleep, when I saw something. No, someone. A man cloaked in black with a snow-white owl on his shoulder. He held a staff and had some sort of summoning circle around him. He said one thing to me: "Find me, child, for I am Arles." Then everything went black.